one of our objectives here is to identify concrete deliverables, things that we can build within our community here that'll help. And one of the areas that has been at the very core of what we've sought to do with Culture Summit since its inception was exploring the idea of how to use the arts or how to use culture to combat extremism in all its forms at all of its levels, you know, with children, with adults, in societies that are torn apart by it, in societies that may not yet be, but where you want to avoid it. And so here we have Mani Ansar, Executive Director of the Festival in the Desert, and we have my old friend, His Excellency Maqsoud Kruse, who's the Executive Director of Hedayah. We have Kareem, our award winner. You did not make this suit.
No, it was partially my design too.
It is. The the coats he's been wearing the past couple of nights.
I only wear my design.
He designed the coats, which are pretty special.
This is my friend.
And afterwards, if you wish to discuss with Kareem making some clothes, we can do that. And then we have Naveen Afuni, who is a moderator with Sky News Arabia, who has been a correspondent in many of the regions we're talking about, but I also learned is a violinist.
Yeah.
So she brings together the knowledge of both sides of all this. Let me turn it over to you.
Thank you, David. Good morning, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Terrorism has become a problem of global proportions, drawing an ever-growing number of countries into its orbit. Terrorism kills people, displaces others, threatens democratic institutions, undermines the economy, and destabilizes regions. When people think about terrorism, the topic of art rarely factors into their thought process. However, the correlations between terrorist events and the concept of artistic expression and performance are not negligible. Culture can play an important role in preventing the development of a terrorist mentality. The strongest and most public embodiment of culture is found in the arts. It is through the arts that the values, forms, and events which shape identity, preserve tradition, and reinforce cultural identity are maintained. When we refer to culture, we think of the arts. In the world of counterterrorism, we know of the art of combating extremism. However, today, we will discuss something further more interesting, combating extremism with all sorts of arts. I want to welcome my speakers today, Dr. Maqsoud Kruse, the Executive Director of Hedayah Center in the UAE, Mr. Mani Ansar, the Executive Director of the Festival in the Desert in Mali, and Mr. Kareem Wasfi, the founder of the Peace through Global Arts Foundation and the conductor of the Iraqi National Symphony Orchestra. Maqsoud, I want to start the session with a question to you. Why has culture increasingly become a target of terrorism? As an example, in recent days, it happened in Mosul Museum by ISIS in 2015, and it also happened in Afghanistan by Taliban in 2001. Why are cultural sites victims of terrorist groups?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for being in such an electrifying summit. And I like the spinning chairs as well, so I really appreciate it. Frankly speaking, if you look into any extremist in the world and you ask them directly, we don't want you to be an extremist, their immediate response would be, so what do you want me to be? At the moment, they have a sense of purpose. They have a sense of identity. They have a sense of direction. They know exactly why they're here. They know exactly where they're going, and they know exactly why they do what they do. If you take that out of them, you leave the youth with a vacuum, with a sense of emptiness. Their sense of existential anxieties, not knowing why they're here, not knowing where they're going, is part of the problem. I claim that culture is the antidote. When people know exactly their sense of purpose, when they have a product, a type of theme that helps them to move forward with their lives, you will see a difference in how people handle the issues of extremism.
Thank you, Maqsoud. Kareem, you are famous for everyone for visiting the aftermath of bomb sites in Iraq, especially in Mosul. Now, I'm curious to know, why do you go to these sites? How do people react with you? What do they tell you? What do they ask you?
It's a very, well, thank you again for everything that we're sharing here. It's very positive. And it was a multifaceted, very holistic approach towards resolving. It was a proactive approach as well as I've stated before. It wasn't a reactive act of defiance. It was a combination of both. In my capacity prior to that as a conductor of the National Symphony, we faced actually similar challenges, especially in 2006 and 2007 when I decided to actually stay in Iraq as opposed to leaving like many others. So it was a proactive, it is still a proactive approach towards de-radicalization, a preventative approach that I think arts and culture in general, music in particular, and sound at the level of the core, the resonance of sound and vibration towards self-realization, self-conceptualization, and a higher level of consciousness and awareness for the populace to be able to feel I am and then we are. I can't disagree, I totally agree that we all actually sense that there's a lack of identity, there's a lack of a clear path or a vision towards what comes next. And that is partially based upon the lack of I am, because there was a very, the impact of political instability in that region and probably in the Middle East also, similar to other parts of the world, was a very a wide spectrum of impact that had included all sorts of lives. So why in particular that? Terror and intimidation and radicalization chose every element of life to be turned into a battle zone. I chose to do the same, to turn every, in time and space, at every possible opportunity, whether it's a car bomb site or an intimidated societal engagement and community outreach that we know that's intimidated by the isms of extremism and radicalization and all that, to choose that to turn into an area of beauty, integration, mutual understanding at the grassroots level, mitigation, reconciliation, based upon respect and dignity and self-identification. Even if we restructure Maslow's pyramid, we identify what the problems are, and we needed to do something very proactive towards that in support of the commitment to life and development and refinement and cultivation. And there's nothing that has an influential effect more than arts and technology. We were just discussing something similar. What we have experienced is very similar. ISIS is not a new game. ISIS is not, we have had, maybe all of us will have a little ISIS inside of us. We don't know. We don't, maybe. No, what I mean is, if we claim the tabula rasa, the clean slate of function, if we're all this white canvas when we're born, and then within a cultural, traditional, societal engagement, educational engagement, or lack of all of the above, we become targets of lack of identity, and we might become our own ISIS. So ISIS is just a new phase of isms that had existed since probably the very first period of creation.
There are definitely many factors that came to a point where we had ISIS or Al-Qaeda or any other
I
extremist
chose
group.
to wage our battle of civility and through civilization and refinement exactly the same way psychology was used by extremism, intimidation was used. We might become as actually, and don't quote me on that, but we might become as radicals towards civilization as it's radicalized within the perspective of, but in a manner that is more proactive and more preventative to empower, again, self-respect and identity, and to help and assist the populace in making choices, proper choices of how you want to proceed. What do you choose? How do you choose to live? What factor, what right do you have, you're entitled to correct others, and not only that, to actually take their lives away? What gives you that right? Is it the architecture of the universe? Is it God? Is it religion? Is it the Abrahamic religions? Is it the rest of the religions? And so forth. So to have a clear path towards a very precise, at the level of the core, at the molecule, at the vibrational level of the spirit of who we are as species, I thought music, sound, and a proactive action of sharing who we are as an identity would help to prevent, would help to educate, and would also will help in empower refinement, and sustain peace?
I think we all agree that culture, music, art are basic needs. As a musician, I've always believed that and I'm also a researcher in extremism and counterterrorism, and I always found that all the attacks that have been done, there was no musicians involved, no artists involved.
Very simple.
So you could never find a terrorist attack or an attempt to a terrorist attack that any musician or artist is involved in, which means a lot of things nowadays in 2018. Many of your concerts got cancelled due to threats from terrorist groups. Yet you continue with your project on trying to combat extremism through arts and through your very nice music. Are there any results that you can share with us in Mali that any outcome of your project there?
Thank you. Let me first explain that our festival was held in Timbuktu, in the north of Mali. For many people, Timbuktu is nowhere. In fact, Timbuktu is somewhere, but it's far. When the extremists invaded the north of Mali in 2012, the first target was culture. They destroyed the mausoleum. They went to our festival area and they shooted it and say, no more music. So the first target was music. That means we were the first victim before start the rules of having the how you call it?
Niqab.
Niqab.
For all this, the first decision I take is to stop music. And of course, we have no way to do that, go out of Timbuktu because we were in danger. But music in Mali is so important that when you want to stop music, you do a big mistake. Not possible, because music in our daily life, we have a social group called the griot. The griot is a social, it's not a tribe, it's a group in the society who are our storyteller, who doing music, who tell to the society what to do or what not to do. They are the only group who can go to the king and say what you did is not good. So they are a kind of catalyst, I don't know the name in English, but these people who regulate in the society who say what is good, what is not good. So this griot, when the Mali was invaded, the government was collapsed, and there is really a kind of anarchy. We had only artists stand up and say, no, we don't accept this system. We had more than 40 artists, musicians, who joined together and speak to the population. Please keep your calm. Please stay yourself. Do not accept this. So the first fight was from artists, from musicians who say, no, we are not accepting this. We should continue our tradition. We should continue our music. So this is why the festival itself, it couldn't happen again in Timbuktu. But with help of many friends, because before we had many visitors around the world who came to this festival in Timbuktu. And we get many calls from everywhere in the world, especially from the United States, where we had big important person from the press, from the music areas.
I'm sure you know of Suad Massi, the Algerian singer. She had to cut her hair to perform as a man because of terrorist threats. Yes.
This is one of the ways where artists maintain what they do against the danger. And this is what we do there in Mali. And instead of stop the festival, we organize it as a festival in exile. And with our artists, we go everywhere in the world. We create an organization called it, with support of some friends in the United States and in Europe, called it Timbuktu Renaissance. Because Timbuktu is going to disappear. So we have to maintain Timbuktu and its culture. So we create Timbuktu Renaissance. And we are going with our artists to play everywhere and explaining to the world what is happening in Mali, what is happening in the Sahel region, and explaining to the world it's a danger. He is targeting all the world. He is targeting tolerance and liberty.
Thanks, Mani. Maqsoud, when we address security issues through culture, this requires a shift in thinking. So from solving the problem to eliminating the cause of extremism that moves to terrorist attacks. From your experience, I mean, as someone who works closely on counterterrorism through your center, don't you think that we need this kind of shift in thinking in counterterrorism strategies that implement culture as the core of fighting terrorism instead of a substitution for it? Because when all governments and states were fighting Al-Qaeda, they were always using the weapons, and some researchers refer to education and culture. But nowadays, I notice that there are many voices that are rising to combat extremism through culture. How do you think this could be applicable into our region?
One definition of critical thinking that I personally endorse is basically critical thinking is the awakening of the intellect to study itself. Therefore, this constant revision of where we stand, where we go, how we strategize, is equally important to what kind of programs we're actually developing. It's in our organizational DNA at Hedayah, the International Center of Excellence for Countering Violent Extremism, that we've shifted from the traditional security, policing, military approaches to countering extremism to saying that we have to acknowledge the other dimensions, the other factors that will include psychology, sociology, economy, politics, even religion, in a way that we haven't seen before. Therefore, when we talk about cultural diplomacy, arts diplomacy, even sports diplomacy, what we are talking about that we need to basically move from a reactive approach where we counter everything and we start to set the stage, decide on the tone, and we actually produce what direction we need to take. In other words, if we wanted to make a difference, we all need to be part of the solution because the future is what we want it to be.
But Maqsoud, I'm sure you've met probably former members of any of the terrorist groups like I did, and when you meet those people, you think that, I don't want to use the word brainwashed, because it's not what people think. They do have a way of thinking that is totally different from our way of thinking. Do you think what we're talking about now applies on those people?
I think it's the lack of what we've talked about that led them to be in where they are in the beginning. If they had a simple conversation with someone that they trusted, who would tell them, you can still support whatever justified cause, whatever just cause that you're planning to work and support, but you have different ways of doing it, you can contribute through different means, probably they will not reach a point where they either have to kill someone else or blow up themselves. In other words, they reach the point of actual suicide by going through a form of psychological suicide in the first place. You see, one of the interesting phenomena that we've seen when we look at these extremists, there's something called deviant creativity, where a criminal uses their own creativity, their own skills, their own giftedness in the very wrong direction. Imagine if these natural talents were actually channeled in the right way. Imagine if we gave them platforms to tell them you can still grow, you can still develop, you can still do what you need to do, you can still be responsible for your own life, make a difference, and this is how you need to do it. To be very frank with you, our failure to accommodate the requirements, the needs of our own youth, understanding the differences, the changes that we are facing, in a way contributed to this. While extremists, they get it, they understand, and they know how to connect like we will never ever learn.
Yes, I agree. Karim, how can art therapy and music disrupt the activities of those who promote violent extremism?
This is a I wanted actually to add, to share with you,
Sure.
but this is a different level. There are many orbits of operational strategies that should be implemented. One starting from home, basically starting from a family, all the way to the educational systems. Schools and so forth. If we're discussing whichever terminal, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, whichever group, Boko Haram, I've seen lately, I have received a report of more than 322 terrorist groups. This is a budget of many countries.
Yeah.
This is not a budget of some lost, stoned individuals in the desert of God knows where. This is a very organized, and the networking is much better than, more effective. Let me correct this. It's a functioning network. The problem is with equilibrium. Altruism and good doers and all of us, we're not living in silos anymore. We're connecting, but that networking is much more connected. I wouldn't say advanced because we're trying. So, it's a different level of operational. Some of it is preventative, in the case of refugee camps, in the case of orphans, in the case at the grassroots level, at the level of shaping a personality past the tabula rasa that we know, towards what comes next. One of the problems was communication. And then when communication became the most advanced technological, the fourth generation of technology now, and pretty soon we're experiencing AI and deep thought and Google and the robots, and I love all of that. It should not be to our surprise that that is not soon to be possibly utilized and used in a path that might be interpreted as a terrorist approach. So music therapy, art therapy, whatever therapy, a therapeutic approach of music or sound does work. Sometimes cultural diplomacy is misinterpreted as being a shy, refined approach against this rough ashlar of being that does not necessarily work, and it might be true. Such a high level of violence does not need diplomacy. It needs a powerful approach by culture, very, very aggressive and very straight to the point, to overcome the ugliness of the grotesque acts of terror and the thought behind it. So it's not a very diplomatic approach.
See, I agree with you, Karim, but the results, we see them on the very long run. You see, like after one or two generations, it's not something that is immediately effective.
That's why I meant it's a different layers. There's the orbit of educational system that has to be reconsidered in the whole area where we know that some of the terrorist mentalities are being nurtured and embraced. We have terrorist individuals from Europe, from North Africa, from other parts of the world, and that I don't identify that as a culture, but an individual within a culture where they feel displaced, where they feel they were born in North Africa, I wouldn't name a country, somewhere across the Mediterranean, and then they move up north, southern Europe. They're shocked with a certain lifestyle, and there's loss of identity, and that creates conflict, and they're not nurtured or embraced. It always comes back to the self, how self is identified, and how I am is not becoming we are in a very holistic, inclusive way, with preserving the importance of every individual within this temple, this cathedral of thoughts, this cloud of thought as human beings that we all share.
Mani, up to what extent do you believe that culture plays a specific role in the aftermath of a terrorist attack, especially that in Mali there's unfortunately a lot of terrorist attacks? So how can you as an artist think that you could play a role in the aftermath of this attack?
I would like first to explain that artists in Mali and in this part of Africa have a very, very important social role. People love them, people trust in them. When a president speaks, people know that he just want to be re-elected, or when an imam speaks, the same. But when artists speak, people listen to them more than the president. What he says, people trust in him, and this is why artists have a role of sensibilization for the population, very, very important. So when you, in our country, use artists like Oumou Sangare or Leitali Farka Touré or Sali Ordinary Wen, what they say, everyone listens and trusts in it. And because the message they are spreading is a message of union, a message of truth, a message of to maintain our tradition. So, you know, Timbuktu is in the middle of the Sahara, crossroad from the North Africa and the Black Africa. For centuries, it used to be the caravan road cross, and we hosted every kind of person, every kind of religion, Islam, Christian, traditional religion. All these people live together, make trade, and no problem between this population. So we have this tradition, and our griot, I want to remind that griot means artist. We have this group, griot. Their role is to tell history, to tell what we do, and to give the right message to the population. So we use these artists to give a message for peace, for tolerance. And it's more important than when it comes from media or when it comes from a politician.
Now, my last question before David comes in, and I want brief answers from all of you. You know, one day, states and governments will get over ISIS or Boko Haram or Al-Qaeda, but we will have a generation of children who were born under the ruling of these terrorist groups. In your opinion, each one of you, how do you think that artists can work parallel with the government to prevent us from having a new generation of extremists in the future?
Let me begin by a very personal experience. I have a German father, blonde and green eyes, and a fantastic, beautiful Emirati mother. And basically, people who know about my background, I always ask them this: how do you actually classify me? Am I white or black? Am I European or Arab? Am I Christian, Muslim, or none of the above? Socrates once said, I'm not an Athenian nor a Greek, I'm a citizen of the world. It's that sense of connectedness and people being able to move forward with their ideas that makes a difference. In other words, there are two types of identities. There's identity by birth, but then there's identity by choice. You are not what you were born, but you are who you want to be. And it's that sense of control, that sense of independence, the ability to help these young ones who are looking for their soul, who are trying to make a difference and influence. You don't want them to just go back doing nothing, maybe clubbing or Facebooking, and nothing wrong with that. But they need to have a purpose. They need to understand that they're significant, they have weight, and they have importance in what they need to do. And to be very frank with you, if we indeed succeed in defeating extremism, where I don't believe that, because unfortunately, if you ask any criminologist, would we have ever a society with zero crime rate? They'll tell you no. Unfortunately, it's part of the human condition. You'll always have deviance. Extremism is no exception. However, let's assume we indeed succeed in 100% eliminating extremism. Would that be actually enough? In my opinion, extremism is a symptom, not the disease. And the real problem is in the sense of purpose.
Mani?
The problem of a new generation is really a big problem in our area. These young men, are really are victim or are involved easily involved in this extremism, because these extremists have a lot of money. They capture hostage and exchange them for millions of dollars, and they were in a very poor area with hopeless for the young men. So they call them and give money and train them with arms. And these young who have which were hopeless now, they call them and they give them gun. You were in a hopeless situation. The day after you have a gun, you are powerful, you have money, so it's easy for them to join, to involve them. So it's really a danger. This is why some organizations try to stop this by giving jobs. This morning we had here an organization called IRC, International Rescue Committee, who is in Timbuktu, and giving job, giving education. This kind of project is really important to prevent for young men to go in the bad side.
Thank you, Mani. Karim?
Strategize, identify tasks, and implement. And we don't always necessarily have to be part of the strategy. Maestros and musicians can strategize as well. So at the grassroots level, we had funny terminology sometimes in Iraq. I would call actually a group of musicians the militia of music. It defies the purpose, but for that very particular local mentality, it made sense. Guns are a very short-term, very quick solution. What we're discussing is a long-term commitment, but we can try de-radicalize. We definitely can implement preventive techniques and strategies to be resolving this whole ordeal. We're too busy with this. The most advanced thing now is communication and technology, more than the power of exchanging information. I would use Facebook and everything else to have these kids communicate with the rest of the world, and then they can have a choice. And if they have a choice of being an ISIS fighter, they can go fight in the desert on their own, shoot a mannequin, or blow themselves up. And we could try to prevent that as well. So it starts with education, enlightenment, the power of knowledge, and supporting self-recognition and identity, and helping to be able to assist people in making a choice.
Thank you, Karim. Now we're going to open the ground for questions.
We have no time.
No?
No, I wish we were, but we're out of time and we've got a very full schedule. So please join me in thanking the panel for a great discussion.
Thank you so much.
So as they clear the seats, we're going to get ready for the panel. Maybe, Carla, you can introduce as we go.
So, we're shifting gears a little bit today, and I'm delighted that one of the new additions in our programming here at Culture Summit includes theater. And not just theater, but films. As many of you have seen on the schedule, we have some really exciting performances that will be shared with us by the Sundance Institute and their members this afternoon, starting at lunch. But in this case, it's my great pleasure to introduce you to Fokker Gerling, who's a theater artist and storyteller. He's quite unusual in that his passion is to be the creator of flip books. He is an intrepid traveler, and since 2003, he has walked over 3,500 kilometers, which for someone who has a Fitbit, I can tell you that's a lot, throughout Germany, inviting people to visit his traveling flip book, which he calls the Thumb Cinema, as an exhibition, and he created the flip book as portraits in order to showcase some of the people he met along the way. In the show, Portraits in Motion, Gerling shows the audience a selection of his favorite portraits by holding each one under a video camera so that its moving images are projected onto a larger screen. In a series of enchanting and precious moments, the people he photographed come to life on screen as he shares the heartwarming and moving stories behind each encounter. Please join me in welcoming Fokker Gerling. Thank you.
A very warm welcome to Portraits in Motion. As you heard before, my name is Fokker Gerling, and I'm a flipbook filmmaker. 15 years ago, I decided that any serious flipbook filmmaker must test his worth in the field. To do this in the sweltering hot summer of 2003, I set off on foot. In 3 months, I walked from Berlin in Germany to Basel in Switzerland. This was a walk of about 1,200 kilometers. It was my first long walk, and it was a great experience. I realized that walking gave me a completely new view of the world. And so I decided to do it again. Since then, I've walked nearly every summer, and in total I've walked some 3,500 kilometers, nearly all in Germany. In this show, I tell you something about my walks and about my life experience when I walk. When I go on my travels, every day I carry this hawker's tray you see here. I always place 6 flipbooks on it, showing portraits of people I met on earlier walks. Imagine a sign at the front of this tray saying, "Please visit my traveling exhibition." When I'm on my walks, I don't take any money of my own. I live purely by showing my exhibition to people I meet on the streets, in pubs, in their gardens, or wherever. The entry to my exhibition is always free. If people like what they see, and if they like to support me, I ask them to pay a symbolic exit fee. I attach an empty honey jar to my hawker's tray and use it as a collecting box. I'll tell you more about the people I've met later, but first I would like to tell you something about the technique, how I create the flipbook portraits you will see in this show. I'm sure you know from your own experience what it's like to have a camera pointing at you. Normally you strike a pose, consciously or unconsciously, and you wait for the moment when the picture is taken to become normal again. The way I work is different. I asked my protagonists if I could photograph them. They expect to be photographed once or twice as they're used to being photographed. Instead, I photographed them 36 times in 12 seconds at 3 times per second. My camera, it's an old film-based Nikon F3, is quite loud. And this is really important for this kind of photography because with my loud camera, I physically shake my protagonists out of their poses. Every click of my loud camera throws them back on themselves, and all of a sudden they start to react, if only out of exasperation that I don't stop. The gestures and emotions people show in these moments are of course not planned or staged, and so they reveal a certain truth. And these moments of truth are the essence of my work, because they tell a great deal about the character of the people. Before I show you a selection of flipbooks taken this way, I would like to let you see how it feels to have my camera pointed at you. So imagine we meet while I am on one of my walks. For some reason I like you, and so I ask you if I could photograph you. And then this would happen. Hello again. So don't be worried, it's no film in the camera. You see, 12 seconds can become a quite long time. Now we'll see a love film from Germany. I think there's no one in the audience who doesn't feel for the girl on the right. Towards the end of my first walk, I met Ariane in Zurich. She was 13 years old, and she told me that she hated her freckles because they looked like pimples. I photographed her, and it took me years to find her again. I really wanted to give her her flipbook to say thank you. When I met her the second time, she was 19. I asked her if I could photograph her again. We took the photos at almost the same spot as 6 years earlier. So this flipbook is called Girl with Freckles, and after this one you'll see the flipbook Young Woman with Freckles. Thank you. Now I would like to tell you something about my walks. So you can imagine how it looks like when I'm on one of my walks. I've brought along this photo. It shows me together with a visitor to my exhibition. My first long walk was this 3-month walk from Berlin to Basel. As I told you earlier, I knew that I probably would not come back as a rich man. I just wanted to make enough money to survive. Some people gave me things to eat. Others paid the symbolic exit fee, allowing me to buy food. When I am walking, I take a tent and sleep outside, not on any campsites, but wherever I can find a good place, in the woods, on a farmer's field. I've even slept in a cemetery or in a beer garden. So all in all, I can manage on €5 a day. And now I would like to show you some more of the people I've met, people who were open-minded and curious enough to visit my traveling exhibition. As you can see here, in Germany we even have some curious policemen. And I think this man probably would not go to a theater where I usually perform my show, so that's why I'm very happy that I managed to visit him on one of my walks. Flipbooks can be interesting in nearly all sorts of situations, even while having a bath. But I have to admit that in this case, I was very happy and relieved when I got this flipbook back dry and safe. This was also a very interesting situation. One of the workers said to me, "You must be at a pretty loose end if you have nothing better to do than show your flipbooks to people on the street." The main reason why I went walking in summer 2003 and why I hope to continue this walking and flipbook project right up to the point where I will be an old gray man is that I want to make more flipbooks. And I know that I will meet people when I walk, people I would otherwise never encounter in my life. In total, I've spent more than 11 months on my walks. Here's a very short selection of people I met in that time. This is Alfred Vogtländer. I met him on the second day of my first expedition. It was still in the outskirts of Berlin because it's not possible to leave Berlin on foot within one day. I was walking past his garden and I hadn't even noticed him when I heard a voice calling over the fence, asking me what I was doing with all my stuff. So we got talking, and he asked me into his house. First, he showed me the bed where his wife had died a few years before. Then he opened his wardrobe and showed me all the colorful suits he used to wear. He went to his television, switched it on, and proudly showed me all the channels that he could receive. He even asked me if I wouldn't stay and watch TV with him for a bit. Then he gave me a glass of schnapps and some chocolate. He went into his kitchen and packed some bread, cream, liver pate, and sugar for me, and I had to convince him that I wouldn't need the 250 grams of butter he was trying to give me. Outside his house, I asked him if I could photograph him. Of course, I didn't tell him that I didn't want to take just 1 or 2 pictures of him, but a whole flipbook. But of course, he realized that I was taking his picture for a long time and that I took many pictures of him. And then he said, "I'll pay you for every one of those. I've got enough money. I've paid for everything all my life." So this flipbook is called Old Man with a Baseball Cap. And after this flipbook, you'll see the flipbook Boy by Canal. When I reached the outskirts of the city of Münster, I saw Alex and his friends swimming in a canal. When I passed by, I got talking to Alex, and he said he thought I was a tramp. So I explained to him what I do, and then he said, "Oh, I could never do anything like that in my whole life." I asked him why not, and he replied, "Well, I need electricity." I asked him why he needed electricity, and he said, "For my computer and TV." In this moment, I instantly knew that I wanted to take his picture. I asked him if that would be okay for him. His friends heard, and they all gathered around, and they all wanted their pictures taken too. But I told them that I only wanted to take Alex's photo. And when Alex heard that, he was so proud that he could hardly hold back his laughter. In the pedestrian zone of Tübingen, I met Julia and her daughter Franziska. I was sitting at a fountain and taking a break. Franziska sat down next to me and she looked at all my flipbooks. Then her mother joined us. They were shopping together, and I really liked the way the two of them behaved towards each other. They seemed more like friends than mother and daughter. So I asked them if I could photograph them. Went into the backyard of a student pub nearby where we would be in peace. There was an old couch there, and the two of them sat on it to have the portrait taken. Then I asked them if each of them would write a few sentences about the other. They did that, and they gave me permission to read these sentences to you in my show. My mom is called Julia. Sometimes she worries too much. I think I would still like her even if she wasn't my mother. My mom comforts me. I can talk to her really well about anything. She and Dad still love each other, sometimes as if they had only just met. That is not the case for my friend's parents. She's very pretty. Sometimes she says too much. It is not easy to say much more about her. Franziska walked up to you and talked to you. When I came out of the shop, I saw her sitting with you at the fountain and looking at your flipbooks. I really like how open she is with people. Franziska is very hungry for life. I think that's great. But sometimes I'm afraid that she tries to do too much and the stress will be too much for her. I'm very happy that she tells me so much about her life. I'm a bit afraid of next autumn when she will no longer be living with us all the time because she will have finished school. I will miss her. The flipbook is called Mother and Daughter. And now I've nearly come to the end of this excerpt of my show, Portraits in Motion. The very last flipbook I will show you is a quite special flipbook. It is one of my very favorite flipbooks, and it's called Two Boys with a Fishing Rod. To prove that this really is a flipbook, I will now show it to you for a fourth time. This time, please pay special attention to the grasp behind the shoulder of the boy on the right. You see, in a flipbook, even a blade of grass can become a big event. Thank you very much. Thank you. And a big applause for all my protagonists. Thank you very much.